Rain swept across Whitethorn like a veil, thin and cold, turning the street to ink. Lanterns trembled in the wind. Horses tossed their heads and stamped. The saloon doors breathed in and out. A piano note hung in the dark and did not find its next friend. That was when I saw him. He stood under the awning of the livery with the kind of stillness that made weather change its mind. Hat low, coat heavy with rain. The lamp behind him showed the cut of his jaw and the quiet at the corner of his mouth. Colt Mercer, my father's enemy. The man I had been told to fear. The man I had learned to picture with smoke at his back and trouble in his boots. I should have turned away. I should have crossed to the church and knelt with the kind of respect the town expected from the sheriff's daughter. I did not. My feet moved toward the saloon. My skirt brushed the wet boards. My pulse tapped a faster beat than the rain. Inside, the light was honey and smoke. Cards flicked. Men grumbled. The barkeep wiped a glass long after it was clean. I felt eyes tilt toward me and then tilt away, the way eyes do when the sheriff's blood walks through a doorway. I nodded to Mrs. Pruitt in the corner. She nodded back and set her needle down. I took a breath that carried sawdust and whiskey and a hint of cedar from the fire. He came in behind me. I did not look. I felt the change in the room. I felt the piano player pause between songs and pretend he was choosing a key. I felt the air narrow as if it had to pass him first. I chose a table near the stove. The chair was warm. My hands were not. I wrapped my fingers around a cup and waited for heat to climb into me. The door creaked again and closed with a small, careful sound. The piano found a slow tune that walked with its head down and its hands in its pockets. Colt moved through the light like a man who did not ask permission from shadows. He stopped at the bar. He did not sit. He asked for coffee. The barkeep poured with a respect that looked almost like surprise. "No whiskey tonight, Mr. Mercer. Only coffee." His voice tried to be steady. "Only coffee," Colt said. I kept my eyes on the stove. I watched the fire bite a log and then soften. I watched a knot in the wood pop and spark. I told myself that I was only here because the rain had driven me in. I told myself that my father was on a late patrol and would never know. I told myself many things that did not hold. The door opened again. A gust pushed through and scattered the piano notes. 3 men entered with mud on their trousers and the raw look of a long ride. I knew the first 2 by name. Rix Danner and Tom Galt. The third I did not. He had a scar that cut his left brow and refused to end. They took a table by the mirror and kept their hats on. They looked at Colt. He did not look back. I knew there were stories. Colt had ridden with the Red Valley outfit once. He had left them without a word, and with a map they wanted. He had taken nothing but his horse and a debt he would carry in his bones. Some said he had killed a man for what that man had done to a girl who never told the truth of it. Some said he had killed no one, and that fate had put the blood on his hands as a warning. My father said the only clean way to handle Colt Mercer was with the weight of the law and the length of a rope. My father was away. The rope was not. But then he spoke. "Miss Wynn." My name in his voice felt like the first match in a cold room. I turned. He had moved without a sound. He stood 2 steps from my table. Water glinted on the brim of his hat and fell in quiet threads to the floor. "Mr. Mercer." I said his name as if it belonged to the night. I did not mean to. "May I sit?" He was not asking in the way most men asked. He was offering a chance to refuse without harm. I nodded at the chair across from me. He took it. The room made a small noise and then pretended it had not. We said nothing for a long moment. The stove sighed. Outside, thunder rolled far off, the tired kind, ready to go home. He drank his coffee without sugar. I watched his hands and thought of the stories again. I thought of the girl no one defended. I thought of the lines on his palm that might have been cut by rope or fate or both. "You should not be seen with me," he said. "You should not be seen at all," I said. His mouth tilted. Not a smile. Something like an apology made of breath. "I heard your father rode north," he said. I did not answer. I did not say that my father followed a rumor like a man who feared silence. I did not say that he wore the badge like armor and a wound. I traced a circle on the warm table with one finger. The grain remembered me, and then let me go. The men by the mirror stood. They had finished nothing. Their eyes had only grown colder. The scarred one touched his hat brim in a way that was not polite. Rick Stanner said a word that was more spit than speech. Tom Galt laughed without the part where a man feels better afterward. Colt did not turn. His shoulders told me he was listening anyway. He set his cup down. He looked at the fire. He spoke to me. "There are storms that do not come from the sky, Miss Wynn. Try to stand where the roof holds." I wanted to be brave. I wanted to be wise. I wanted to say that I had lived under a roof that always held because my father had built it from law and warning and steel. The truth rose instead. "Sometimes the roof is the storm," I said. He looked at me then, fully. The room faded. The piano stopped pretending. In his eyes I saw rain on a black river and a rider trying to cross without losing the light he carried. It was a small light. It was enough. The scarred man spoke behind him. "Evening, Mercer. Heard you brought a map to the wrong fire. Heard you lost your courage along the way." Colt did not move. His voice stayed quiet. "Heard you brought your mouth to the wrong room." The barkeep set a hand on the shelf and waited. Mrs. Pruitt threaded her needle and pulled the stitch with care. No one breathed too loud. Rick Stanner came a step closer. He touched the back of a chair and dragged it an inch and let it scream. Tom Galt put his boot on the rail. The scarred man reached inside his coat and found the comfort he was looking for. I rose. I did not plan to. My chair scraped, and the sound felt like a small animal in a trap. 3 heads turned. Colt did not. My voice came out steady. "Gentlemen, the rain is doing enough work. It does not need your help to make a night ugly." Rick Stanner laughed again. It sounded older this time. Tom Galt grinned at the mirror so he would not have to look at me. The scarred man sized me like trouble he might enjoy. His hand stayed inside his coat. Colt spoke without heat. "Leave it, Ricks. Leave it, Tom. Take your friend and your weather and walk out into the kind that comes down from the sky." Something shifted then. Not in them. In me. I saw the way he stood between me and their line of fire without looking at the line. I saw the calm that was not pride but choice. I saw a past he did not parade. I felt the foolish loyalty of my heart lean toward him like a moth warms its wings at the edge of a flame. The scarred man drew the gun he had practiced drawing in front of a mirror. The piano player made a sound like a prayer. Colt moved only his right hand. It settled on his belt with a touch that did not hurry, not a draw, not a threat, a promise to his own bones that he would not die standing still. Outside, the thunder found its voice again. Inside, my cup rattled on the saucer. I thought of my father on a north road, and of the rope that waited in dusty rooms where men made decisions in daylight and pretended they were clean. I thought of the truth that had been sleeping inside me since I first heard Colt Mercer's name. The truth woke up and looked me in the eyes. If this story has warmed a quiet corner of your heart, stay close, because the night is not done telling. And as the scarred man tightened his grip and the rain leaned in to listen, I found my voice, and the words I spoke set the next moment in motion. The gun never fired, not at first. The silence between intent and sound stretched thin as a string drawn to breaking. Rain hissed against the windows, a slow applause for a play that hadn't chosen its ending. Then the hammer fell. Colt moved before the noise. His hand found steel with a grace that wasn't speed. It was memory. The shot from the scarred man went wide, carving splinters from the doorframe. Colt's answer came low and final. The man's pistol spun from his grasp, hitting the floor with a dull cry. Smoke curled between us like something alive and weary of the world. The room held its breath. Rick's Danner's grin slipped into something older than courage. Tom Galt dropped his hand away from his gun belt. Even the piano player's fingers hovered above the keys as if afraid to wake the dust. Colt stepped forward, lifted the scarred man's weapon, broke it open, and dropped the bullets one by one onto the table beside me. He looked at me once, just once, and said quietly, "You shouldn't have had to see that." I should have agreed. I should have turned away. But my voice betrayed me. I've seen worse. My father taught me how men look right before they choose hell. Something in his eyes flickered, a brief recognition that maybe we weren't born on opposite sides after all. The rain softened to a whisper. The barkeep poured whiskey this time, no one asking who it was for. Colt didn't touch it. He holstered his gun and walked toward the door. The crowd parted without words. "Mr. Mercer," I said, before I understood why. He stopped under the lamplight, his hat shadowing most of his face. "Yes, Miss Wynn. Those men will tell the sheriff." He half-turned, enough that I caught the corner of a tired smile. "Then I'll tell him the truth." I laughed once, quietly. "You think truth stands a chance in this town?" He didn't answer. He just nodded, as if agreeing with ghosts. Then he stepped into the rain. I watched him go until his shape dissolved into the streetlight. The door swung shut, and the world resumed breathing. Mrs. Pruitt gathered her sewing. "You'll draw trouble standing in the open like that," she murmured. "I think trouble already knows my name," I said. She studied me over the rim of her spectacles, saw something in my face, and chose mercy over questions. Outside, the storm faded into that soft aftersound where the world feels washed and fragile. I left the saloon. The air smelled of wet sage and horses. My boots found puddles that mirrored a sky still heavy with its own secrets. At the end of the street, a lantern burned in the jailhouse window. My father's desk would be empty tonight. He was still north, chasing his ghosts, but I could almost hear his voice, If you ever see Colt Mercer, don't speak, don't listen, and for God's sake, don't believe what's left in his eyes." I tried to remember that warning as I walked toward home. The rain had cooled, but my pulse hadn't. His voice still lingered somewhere behind my ribs, steady and low. Halfway to the hill road, I saw him again. His horse stood under the cottonwoods by the creek, a dark outline against the silver water. He wasn't looking my way, yet somehow he knew I was there. "You followed me," he said without turning. "I walked home," I answered. "The creek just happens to run the same way you do." He turned his head then, the faintest lift of his chin. "You carry your father's temper in your stride. And you carry your sins like they still weigh what they did the first day." That earned the smallest curve of his mouth. "Fair enough." Lightning flared somewhere beyond the ridge, far enough to be beautiful. The thunder followed soft and slow. "Why did you come back to Whitethorn?" I asked. "To return something," he said, "and to finish what should have ended 10 years ago." I stepped closer, the rain dripping from my hat brim onto my collar. "What was taken?" He looked past me, toward the town, where the saloon light flickered faint against the dark. "A life," he said, "and a truth your father never told." The words landed quiet but deep, like nails in wood. "My father doesn't lie," I said. Colt's eyes met mine. "Maybe not. Maybe he just keeps the kind that burns slower." The wind picked up, stirring the wet grass. His horse stamped once, impatient. "Go home, Miss Wynn," he said softly. "You're not part of this storm." I shook my head. "I think I've been standing in it all along." He looked at me a moment longer, as if memorizing something he'd need later. Then he pulled the reins, swung into the saddle, and rode north toward the ridge. I stood until the sound of hooves faded into the wet distance. Then I whispered into the dark, to no one at all. "Then tell me, Colt Mercer, what did my father take from you?" The rain answered for him, soft and endless. If this story has stirred the dust beneath your heart, stay close. Dawn has a way of revealing what the night tried to hide. And as the first light crept over the ridge, I followed its glow, not knowing that the truth waiting beyond would change everything. Dawn broke over Whitethorn like a secret too fragile to shout. Mist rose from the creek and drifted through the cottonwoods, brushing against the rails of our fence. The world looked soft, forgiving. But I knew better. In the west, even the light learned to lie. My father's horse wasn't in the corral. He hadn't come home. Again. I made coffee, black as sin and twice as bitter, and sat at the kitchen table staring at the sheriff's badge that lay beside my hand. That badge used to mean safety. Now it just felt heavy. I kept hearing Colt Mercer's voice through the steam, steady, quiet, honest, in a way that unsettled me more than any outlaw's threat. A truth your father never told. I'd heard every rumor about Colt, a drifter, a killer, a man marked by the Red Valley raid. But last night, when he looked at me, I didn't see a killer. I saw a man haunted by something he couldn't outrun. By the time the sun cleared the ridge, I'd made up my mind. I needed to know what he meant, and what my father had done. The trail north cut through red rock and mesquite. The air still smelled of last night's rain, sweet and earthy. I rode my mare, Clara, slow and quiet, following the faint tracks of Colt's horse. He rode light, barely a trace left behind, a man used to being hunted. By noon, the sky was bright enough to sting. Heat shimmered off the stone, and sweat glued my shirt to my back. I found him near an abandoned line shack, where the land dropped toward the canyon. His horse was tied in the shade, head down, breathing easy. Colt was sitting on a broken fence post, hat off, rolling a piece of sage between his fingers. He didn't look surprised to see me. "I told you to stay home," he said without turning. "I never was good at doing what men tell me," I said. He gave a slow nod. "I can believe that." I dismounted, boots crunching dry earth. "You said my father took a life. Whose?" He studied the horizon a long time before answering. "My brother's." The words hit like a stone in the ribs. "He was a boy," Colt went on. 14. "My father sent him into town to beg your father for help when the Red Valley Riders came. Sheriff Wynn promised he'd send men at dawn." He looked at me then, eyes grey as ash. "Dawn never came for my brother. By the time your father rode out, Red Valley was gone. So was my family." The wind whistled through the canyon below us. I could barely breathe. That was a long time ago. The sheriff's report said the gang moved before anyone could reach them. Colt stood. His shadow fell across mine. "The report was written by your father, and what he didn't write is that he was paid to look the other way. Gold from the ranchers Red Valley worked for. It's the reason he's still got that fine horse, and that badge no one questions." "That's a lie." The words came sharp, too fast, like I needed them to be true before they slipped away. He didn't argue, just looked at me with a kind of sorrow that was worse than anger. "I wanted to believe it was a lie too, once." I turned away, blinking hard at the horizon. The world tilted, the air too still. Behind me, Colt's voice dropped low, almost kind. "I didn't come back for revenge, Miss Wynn. I came for proof. There's a ledger hidden in the old mine north of here. Payments made, names signed. Your father's among them." "Why tell me?" I whispered. "Because truth burns slower when you see it coming," he said. I faced him again. "And what if I find it? What then?" He met my eyes, steady. "Then you'll have to decide whether to stand with him or with me." That night the town slept uneasy. A storm gathered again over the ridge, black and swollen. I sat on the porch, oil lamp flickering, my father's badge turning circles in my palm. He'd returned just before sundown, silent, mud on his boots and whiskey on his breath. He didn't ask where I'd been. He just looked at me once, long, measuring, and said, "You stay away from Colt Mercer. That man's poison." I wanted to ask him why poison sometimes wore a kinder face than justice, but the words stuck behind my teeth. Now, in the dark, thunder rolled and the wind lifted the curtains like ghosts trying to speak. I thought of Colt alone in the canyon, chasing ghosts of his own. I thought of that ledger, and I knew I wouldn't sleep until I found it. I saddled Clara under the storm's first drops. Lightning flashed over the hill, painting the desert in silver. As I rode north, the badge fell from my pocket and landed in the mud. I didn't stop to pick it up. If this story has stirred a whisper in your chest, stay close, because under the coming storm, truths buried in dust are about to rise, and somewhere ahead Colt Mercer was waiting, with the kind of silence that changes everything. The storm came down like judgment. Wind clawed at the sage, lightning licked the ridge, the kind of weather that made a soul feel watched by the land itself. By the time I reached the canyon, the rain had turned the trail into a black river. Clara struggled on the slope, her hooves slipping in the clay, breath steaming in the cold. I guided her under the overhang near the old mine, the one the miners called Widow's Hollow. It was darker than a preacher's guilt down there. The entrance yawned like the mouth of something that had been waiting. My lantern hissed to life, weak and trembling. "Colt?" My voice bounced off the stone, thin and lost. The answer came from deeper inside. A low echo of metal, then a cough. I led Clara to a dry patch, tied her reins, and stepped in. He was there, kneeling by an old desk half swallowed by earth. His shirt clung to him, soaked through, a streak of mud across his cheek. A single candle burned beside him, casting light that made him look half ghost, half man. "You shouldn't have come," he said. "You knew I would." He didn't deny it. Just looked up, the flame catching the quiet anger in his eyes. The ledger lay open on the desk, pages swollen with age, ink faded to brown. His finger traced a line, slow as a prayer. "Here," he said. "Payment received. Samuel Wynn." My father's name, written bold as daylight. I stared at the letters until they blurred. My heart beat like hooves in the dark. "It could be forged." "It could," he said softly. "But you and I both know it's not." The rain hammered the rock above us. Water trickled down the walls like the mine was crying for what it had seen. I reached for the ledger, but he caught my wrist. Not rough, but firm. His hand was warm even through the chill. "Don't," he said. "Once you touch it, there's no going back." "I crossed that line the night you said his name," I whispered. He let go. Slowly, watching me the way a man watches a fuse burn down. I turned the pages, found more signatures, ranchers, lawmen, even the judge who used to bless my father's verdicts. It wasn't just one man's sin. It was the town's foundation, rotten under every step we took. My stomach twisted. He built his life on this. "So did half of Whitethorn," Colt said. "That's why they need me to disappear before the truth walks out of this mine." I closed the ledger. "Then we walk together." He gave me a look I couldn't read, something between disbelief and something dangerous. "You're the sheriff's daughter. You ride out of here with me, and every man in this territory will call you traitor." "Maybe I'm tired of being their kind of daughter," I said. Lightning split the mouth of the cave, and for a moment his face was carved in firelight. He looked older, sadder, like a man who had carried too much truth and not enough rest. "We can't stay," he said. "If your father finds us, he'll burn the evidence and put a bullet in my back before sunrise." "He won't find us tonight," I said. "The storm's too thick." He blew out the candle, and the dark swallowed us whole. The only light came from the lantern between us, its glow trembling like breath. For a moment, neither of us moved. The thunder outside grew distant, slower, as if the world had paused to listen. He stepped closer. The space between us filled with the sound of rain and heartbeat. His voice dropped low. "You shouldn't trust me, Wynn." Maybe not, I said, but I don't trust him either. His hand brushed mine as he reached for the lantern. A spark jumped between our fingers, small, foolish, alive. I could smell the wet leather of his coat, the rain still clinging to him. His eyes met mine, and the anger there had softened into something that felt too much like truth. "I don't want to drag you into this," he said. "You already did," I whispered. Outside, thunder rolled again, gentler now, like it knew the worst had already been said. He turned away, shoulders tense. "We'll ride before dawn, East Trail to Mesa Bend. There's a man there who can keep this ledger safe." And after that, he didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quiet. "After that, I'll do what I came here to do. End this." "You mean my father?" He looked back at me, the truth heavy in his silence. The storm eased to a slow rain. I sat beside him, the ledger between us, and for a long while we said nothing, just listened to the world settle. In the stillness, I realized something dangerous. I didn't fear him anymore. Maybe that was the beginning of the real storm. If this story has lit a small fire in your chest, stay close, because when dawn comes to Whitethorn, the line between justice and love will start to blur. And somewhere beneath that soft rain, a choice neither of us could escape waited for its turn to be made. Dawn crept through the canyon like a thief, pale and quiet. The storm had spent itself. The air was clean, sharp, and cold enough to make breath visible. Outside the mine, the land stretched endless and empty, like it had forgotten what mercy was. Colt was already awake, saddling his horse. The ledger was wrapped in oilcloth, tied tight against the damp. I watched him in silence for a long moment, the rhythm of his movements steady, practiced. He looked like a man built for leaving. "We should ride before the sun clears the ridge," he said, tightening the last strap. "I've never ridden east," I answered. He glanced up. "You will today." I mounted Clara and followed him out of the hollow. The world still smelled of rain and iron. In the distance, Whitethorn was just a smear of smoke and rooftops, half hidden by mist. For the first time, it didn't feel like home. We rode hard, the wind snapping against our coats. For miles we said nothing, just the sound of hooves and the creak of leather. Every so often he'd glance over his shoulder, scanning the ridges. "Expecting someone?" I asked. "Your father's men," he said. "He's not the kind to let go of a trail." I felt a pang low in my chest. "He doesn't know what's in that ledger." Colt's voice was quiet. "He knows enough." By midday, we reached the edge of the mesa. The desert below opened wide, gold and red, veined with dry rivers. We stopped at a shallow ravine where a narrow stream still ran from the storm. Colt dismounted, knelt, and drank from his cupped hands. His hair clung damp against his neck, the sunlight cutting through the wet strands like copper threads. I stayed in the saddle, watching him. "You really mean to take this all the way, don't you?" He looked up, water dripping from his chin. "You don't walk halfway to hell." There was something final in the way he said it, something that made the world smaller. I slid down from Clara, boots sinking into soft clay. "My father's not the only man who did wrong," I said. "That ledger proves plenty more." He nodded. "But he's the one who swore he stood for justice." The wind caught the edge of the oilcloth, lifting it just enough for me to see the shape of the book inside. "If that ledger gets out, it'll burn the whole town down," I said. "Maybe it needs to." We stood facing each other in the silence that followed. The air between us carried the scent of rain, dust, and something faintly electric. "You think burning everything makes it right?" I asked. "I think the truth's the only thing that doesn't rot," he said. I took a step closer. "And what about what comes after?" His eyes met mine, steady, grey, endless. "Maybe that's not for me to live through." I felt my throat tighten. "You plan to die doing this." "I plan to finish it," he said simply, "whatever that costs." The words sat heavy in the air. I reached for the ledger, but he pulled it back, his hand brushing mine. It was a small touch, barely a second, but it lit something fierce under my skin. "You think I can just walk away, Colt?" I said, quieter now. "You should," he replied. "You've still got a name worth keeping." I shook my head. "Not after last night, not after you." He looked at me then, really looked, as if trying to decide whether to speak or to disappear. "Don't say that," he murmured. "Say what?" "Anything that sounds like hope." The wind eased. The sky turned the color of tarnished gold. He stepped back, jaw tight. We ride to Mesa Bend, drop the ledger, then part ways. "I'm not leaving you," I said. "You might have to," he answered, and something in his tone made the promise sound like a warning. By late afternoon, we found a line cabin on the edge of the bend, half collapsed, leaning into the wind. We took shelter there, the air thick with the smell of pine smoke and damp wood. Colt started a small fire, feeding it slow until the orange light filled the corners. I sat on a crate, boots off, rubbing the numb from my feet. He leaned against the wall, watching the flames. "You ever get tired of running?" I asked. He gave a small, humorless laugh. "You ever get tired of pretending you're safe?" That silenced me. The firelight danced across his face, softening the scars the years had left behind. Outside, the rain began again, gentler now, steady and slow, the kind that made the world smell alive. I found myself saying, "When I was little, my father used to tell me the rain was the desert's forgiveness. I never believed him." Colt's eyes lifted to mine. "Maybe he was right once. Not anymore," I said. The crackle of fire filled the space between us. He moved closer, the warmth from his body mixing with the heat of the flames. His hand brushed mine, deliberate this time. The world shrank to breath, heartbeat, and light. "You should rest," he whispered. I didn't move. "If I close my eyes, you'll ride off." He hesitated, then smiled, a slow, sad curve that felt like surrender. "Then I guess you'd better keep them open." The rain deepened outside, steady as a lullaby. The fire glowed low, painting the walls with gold and shadow. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the storm. If this story has warmed a quiet corner of your soul, stay close. Because before sunrise, the truth will find its way to Whitethorn, and no heart will walk out unchanged. And as the fire whispered low, I realized I was no longer sure which side of the law my heart belonged to. The wind died before morning. The desert held its breath, waiting for whatever came next. I woke to the faint sound of saddlebags being buckled and leather creaking. The fire was only embers. Colt stood near the doorway, the ledger in his hands, dawn light brushing his shoulders in pale gold. "You were going to leave," I said. He didn't turn. "Didn't want to wake you. You didn't want me to stop you." He paused. Then he looked over his shoulder, eyes heavy with something between guilt and duty. "Mesa Bend's only an hour from here. The man who'll take this, he won't deal with anyone tied to your father. If I bring you along, he'll bolt." I pulled on my boots. "So you ride alone into a trap?" He gave a faint, crooked smile. "Been doing that most of my life." I stepped toward him. "You don't get to make all the choices, Colt. You pulled me into this. I've got as much to lose as you now." He studied me quietly for a long moment, then said, "You've got everything to lose." "That's not true anymore," I whispered. Something in that silence changed him. His jaw worked, like he was trying to swallow a truth too sharp to keep. Then he nodded once. "Fine. You ride behind me, and whatever happens, you keep the ledger safe." "Deal," I said. We rode east as the first rim of sunlight touched the desert. The world was still wet from the night's rain. Water pooled in the wagon ruts, reflecting the red cliffs like shards of another world. Every sound, the jingle of reins, the steady thud of hooves, felt too loud for a morning like this. Colt didn't speak for a long while. I watched his shoulders move with the rhythm of the horse, saw the tension living in the set of his back. "What happens if your contact doesn't show?" I asked. He didn't look at me. "Then the truth dies where it always does, in the dust." There was no bitterness in his voice, just fact, the kind of acceptance that broke me more than anger would have. By the time we reached Mesa Bend, the sun was high and the heat shimmered like smoke. The mesa opened into a wide basin surrounded by rock. A single shack stood near the center, half buried in sand. Colt dismounted first, tying his horse near a boulder. He scanned the horizon with the caution of a hunted man. "Stay by the horses," he said. I ignored him and followed. "You really think someone's meeting us here?" Before he could answer, a rifle bolt clicked. The sound came from the ridge above. Colt's hand went to his gun. "Too early," he muttered. A voice echoed down. "Put it away, Mercer. You don't walk out of here if you twitch." It was my father's voice. I froze. Colt went still as stone. Sheriff Samuel Wynn rode down the slope with 2 deputies behind him, rifles ready. His coat flapped in the dry wind, his badge catching sunlight like a blade. "Step away from her," he said. Colt's voice was calm, almost weary. "You've got good timing, Sheriff. A few minutes later, and I'd be gone with your sins in my saddlebag." My father's eyes cut to me. "You don't know what you're holding, Leah. That man's poison. He's twisting what happened to turn you against your own blood." I wanted to believe him. God, I did. But the tremor in his jaw told me otherwise. "Tell me he's lying," I said. His answer came too slow. "Everything I've done was to protect this town." Colt laughed once, soft, bitter. "And how many lives bought that protection, Sheriff?" My father raised his rifle. "You think you can drag my daughter into your war and live to tell it?" The world narrowed to the sound of breath, heartbeat, and dust. Colt stood between us, hand hovering near his revolver, but not yet drawing. "Leah," my father said, his voice cracking. "Come here now." I didn't move. He turned his gun toward Colt. "Step aside." "No," Colt said. The air split. The rifle thundered. For a heartbeat, I didn't know who had fallen. Then I saw Colt stumble back, clutching his shoulder, blood darkening his sleeve. He didn't drop. He just turned his head toward me, breath rough. "Ride," he said. I couldn't. My body wouldn't listen. My father chambered another round. "Leah, I said ride." Colt drew his gun, not to shoot, but to throw it. It hit the dirt between us, handle first. He met my eyes. "He's still your father." Then he turned and ran toward the canyon, blood trailing down his arm. The deputies shouted, rifles cracking. He disappeared into the rocks, the sound of hooves fading with him. I stood in the silence that followed, the ledger clutched to my chest, the wind lifting dust around my boots. My father lowered his rifle, his face pale and old in the morning light. "You'll thank me one day," he said. But I already knew I wouldn't. If this story has shaken the quiet corners of your heart, stay close. Because under that same sun, a wounded outlaw still breathes, and a daughter begins to see the truth her father buried. And somewhere beyond the canyon's edge, love and justice are about to draw the same gun. The desert held its breath after the gunfire. Even the wind seemed afraid to move. By the time my father's men finished their search, Colt was gone. The canyon swallowed him, left only a blood trail glimmering dark against the dust. I stood near the rocks, staring into the emptiness, my hands still trembling around the ledger. My father dismounted beside me. "He won't make it far," he said. "That bullet tore through his shoulder clean. He'll bleed out before sundown." I didn't answer. My throat was dry, my heart a knot of things I couldn't name. Grief, fury, something worse. He turned toward me, eyes hard. "You're coming home. This ends now." But as he reached for the ledger, I stepped back. "No." "Leah," he said, his voice low, warning. "Give me the book." I shook my head. "You killed his brother." He flinched, just barely. But it was enough. I saw the truth flicker across his face before he could hide it. "I did what was needed," he said. "You think this town survives on prayers? On law? It survives on compromise." "You call that justice?" I said. "I call it keeping you safe," he snapped. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain that hadn't fallen yet. I looked at the horizon and saw the faint haze of smoke from a distant fire, maybe a camp, maybe worse. Colt was out there, bleeding somewhere in that wilderness, and I couldn't stand still knowing it. My father reached again, but I turned and ran. "Leah!" His voice followed me, breaking the still air. But I didn't stop. I threw myself into the saddle, kicked Clara hard, and rode toward the canyon. The hooves struck rock like thunder. The deputies shouted, but I was already gone, swallowed by the cliffs. The trail twisted through narrow passes and slick stone. The sun dropped low, turning the world to copper. I followed the dark stain of blood across the sand until I saw his horse, limping, tethered near an old cottonwood. "Colt?" The answer came soft and strained. "Here." He sat against the trunk, his coat dark with blood, face pale beneath the grime. One sleeve was tied off with his bandana, the wound seeping slow. "Should have listened when I said to ride," he murmured. I dropped beside him, tearing strips from my skirt. "You think I'd leave you for dead?" "I hoped you would," he said. I pressed the cloth to his wound, firm. He hissed between his teeth but didn't push me away. "You're losing too much," I said. "Not the first time," he muttered. "Maybe the last." "Don't say that." "Then don't look at me like I'm worth saving." I didn't answer. I just kept my hands moving, binding, tightening, trying to hold the pieces of him together while the desert swallowed the light. When it was done, I leaned back, breathless. He was watching me, the same steady way he always did, like he was seeing something he didn't think he deserved. "Why?" he asked softly. "After what your father's done, after what I've done. Why risk it?" "Because I'm tired of living in a town that calls lies mercy," I said. He gave a slow nod, eyes half closed. "You sound like a woman who's already chosen a side." "I didn't choose," I whispered. "The truth did." He smiled faintly, small, broken, beautiful. "That's the thing about truth, Leah. It costs." The sun bled out across the sky, staining the cliffs red. I stayed with him, holding pressure on his wound until the stars came. The fire I built barely held, sputtering against the wind. "Rest," I said. "You'll need your strength come morning." "I'm not sure morning's what I need," he murmured. "Then take the night," I said. "It's all I can give." He opened his eyes again, catching the firelight. For a heartbeat, I saw him not as an outlaw or my father's enemy, but as something else entirely, something human, fragile, and worth every wrong turn that brought us here. He reached for my hand, rough fingers brushing mine. "You should hate me," he whispered. "I don't," I said. "I wish I did." The desert around us was silent except for the fire and his shallow breathing. I rested my head against his shoulder, felt his pulse still strong beneath the blood. He whispered one last thing before sleep took him. "If I don't wake, you take that ledger east. Find Judge Harmon in Copper Bend. He's clean, mostly." "You'll wake," I said. "I'm not done arguing with you." His mouth twitched in something that almost became a smile. Then his eyes closed. The night deepened, stars cold and countless above. Somewhere behind us, the law was already coming. I could almost hear the faint echo of hooves in the dark. I tightened my grip on his hand, the ledger beside us wrapped safe in oilcloth. "If this story has found the quiet ache in your chest," I whispered into the night, "stay close. Because before the dawn, someone will have to bleed for the truth. And I don't know yet whose heart the desert will claim first." The desert before dawn was a half-dream, quiet, silver, and cruelly honest. Wind moved through the cottonwoods with a sound like whispered names. The fire had burned down to coals, painting Colt's face in a faint red glow. He was still alive, barely. His breathing came shallow, steady but thin. I pressed my fingers to his pulse. It fluttered weakly, stubborn as the man himself. The first light touched the horizon. Somewhere behind it, my father's men would already be riding. I had hours at most. "Colt," I whispered, "wake up. We have to move." His eyelids flickered. "I told you. Should have left me." "You told me a lot of things," I said, packing what little we had left into the saddlebags. "I've stopped listening." He tried to rise, winced, and leaned against the tree. "You'll get yourself killed." "Then I won't be alone in it." A dry laugh escaped him, broken halfway through. "You're your father's daughter after all, stubborn as granite." I slung the ledger across my shoulder. "No, I'm not him, not anymore." He said nothing, but his eyes softened. I helped him to his feet, his arm heavy across my shoulders. Together, we reached the horses. By mid-morning, we reached a stretch of red flatland that bled into canyon. The sky was so wide it made you feel smaller than a lie. Colt swayed in the saddle, sweat streaking his face. The wound had opened again. "We'll rest soon," I said. He shook his head. "No time. Your father's close. I can feel him breathing down the wind." "How?" "Because men like him don't sleep while the truth's still walking free." The way he said it made my chest ache. We rode until the sun burned straight overhead. Then, at the base of a cracked bluff, I saw a small cabin half buried in sand, old, forgotten. We dismounted and stumbled inside. The air was cooler there, thick with dust and cedar rot. I laid Colt on a cot by the wall, poured whiskey over the wound, and wrapped it again with a torn sleeve. He hissed through his teeth. "You handle pain better than most doctors." "I learned watching a man get shot and never confess it hurt," I said. He gave a weak smile. "Your father?" "Who else?" The silence stretched. I sat beside him, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Colt, what happens when this ledger reaches the judge? When everyone knows?" "Then Whitethorn burns clean," he said quietly. "Might be the only honest fire it ever sees." "And us?" He opened his eyes, met mine. "We don't get to be part of the rebuilding." The truth of it sat heavy between us. I wanted to say it didn't matter, that survival meant less than justice, but my heart knew better. Outside, thunder rolled again. Not from the sky this time, from hooves. Colt pushed himself upright. "They found us." I ran to the doorway. Dust rose from the west, a thin line of riders cutting across the flats. My father's badge would be glinting somewhere among them. "We can't run," I said. "You'll bleed out." He stood anyway, drawing his revolver, his hand trembling but sure. "Then we stand." "No," I said. "You stood long enough." "My turn now." He looked at me, something fierce and pleading in his eyes. "Leah, if they catch you with me—" "I know." I loaded his spare pistol, the weight cold and perfect in my hand. "But I'm done living in someone else's lie." The riders were close enough now that I could hear bridles clinking, voices shouting orders. Colt took a step toward the door, staggered, and I caught him. Our faces were inches apart. "Don't," I whispered. "You've done enough." His breath brushed my cheek. "If this goes bad—" "It already has," I said. His hand found the back of my neck, rough and gentle all at once. The kiss came like a spark in the storm, brief, reckless, inevitable. His lips tasted of whiskey and dust, and something that felt dangerously close to peace. When he pulled back, his voice was hoarse. "I never meant for it to end here." "Then let's make sure it doesn't," I said, chambering the pistol. Outside, the first rifle cracked. Wood splintered from the cabin wall. We moved together the way two people do when the end has already been written and they're just trying to change the handwriting. The next moments blurred. Shouts, smoke, the bitter tang of gunpowder. I remember Colt firing through the doorway, steady even as blood soaked his sleeve. I remember returning fire, heart hammering in my throat. Then I heard it, my father's voice again, cutting through the chaos. "Leah, step outside. Don't make me do this." I froze. Colt turned toward me, his face pale but calm. "You have to choose now," he said. "Him or the truth." Another shot tore through the window, close enough to scorch the air. I clenched my jaw. "No, I choose both, or neither." Before he could answer, I grabbed the ledger and ran for the back door. The canyon beyond the cabin opened like salvation and ruin all at once. Colt's shout followed me. "Leah, wait!" I didn't stop. The wind whipped the sound away. Behind me, gunfire thundered again. I ran until my lungs burned, clutching that ledger like it was my last heartbeat. If this story has stirred the dust beneath your ribs, stay close, because the truth's about to reach Whitethorn, and love will have to stand where law once did. And as the sun bled out behind me, I knew that nothing about the West was ever clean, except the way it burned everything false to ash. The canyon narrowed as I ran, its walls closing in like the pages of a book written in blood. My breath tore in and out of me, the ledger clutched tight against my chest. Behind me, the echo of gunfire still rolled through the cliffs, each shot a promise I prayed not to recognize. I didn't know if Colt was still alive. I didn't let myself stop to wonder. The ground sloped down toward the dry riverbed. My boots slipped on loose gravel, palms scraping rock as I caught myself. The ledger nearly fell from my hands. I pulled it back to my heart, held it there like it could keep me breathing. The world ahead shimmered with heat and dust. Somewhere beyond those red ridges was Copper Bend, and Judge Harmon, the man Colt said could keep the truth alive. If I could reach him, maybe all of this, my father, the town, the lies, would finally face daylight. A shout cut through the canyon. My father's voice. "Leah, don't run from me." I turned, half expecting to see the same man who'd taught me to shoot, to pray, to fear nothing. But the figure that appeared through the smoke was not my father. It was the sheriff, hard-eyed, jaw tight, rifle in hand. "Stop!" he barked. "No," I said. He came closer, boots crunching on stone. "You don't understand what you're holding." "I understand enough," I said, stepping back. He took off his hat, rain-dark hair clinging to his temples. "You think I wanted this, Leah? That blood on my hands? I did it to keep this town alive. Without those deals, Whitethorn would have burned 20 years ago." "It's burning now," I said. His face hardened. "That ledger doesn't save anyone. It just buries the living with the dead." "I don't believe you anymore." He lifted the rifle, not at my chest, but at the book in my hands. "Then you leave me no choice." For a moment, everything slowed. The wind, the dust, even my own heart. I heard another sound behind him, a low, broken voice carried on the wind. "Don't." Colt. He stood at the canyon's mouth, pale and bleeding, his revolver shaking in his hand. He must have ridden the long way around, half dead, just to reach us. My father turned. "You should have stayed down, Mercer." Colt's voice was hoarse but steady. "I don't die easy. You'll die anyway." "Maybe," Colt said, "but not before she's clear." He moved forward, slow and sure. The sun broke through the clouds, glinting off the rifle barrel aimed at him. "Leah," Colt said, not taking his eyes off my father. "Run. Now." "I'm not leaving you." "You already did once," he said, and his mouth twisted in something that might have been a smile. "Do it again, but make it mean something." My father shifted his aim toward Colt's chest. "You don't give the orders here." "I don't have to," Colt said. "The truth's already on its way." Then everything happened at once. A shot. The sound split the air, sharp as lightning. I saw Colt jerk back, stumble, but stay on his feet. Another shot. My father staggered, the rifle slipping from his grasp. For a breathless second, they both stood, the two men who had built the story of my life in blood and silence. Then my father fell to one knee, pressing a hand to his side. Colt swayed, gun still raised, his face grey with pain. "Didn't want this," he said softly, "but you left no road but this one." My father's voice was weak, but his eyes burned. "You'll damn her, Mercer. You already have." Colt lowered his gun. "Maybe. But at least she'll be free." He dropped the revolver and crumpled to the ground. "Colt!" I ran to him, knees hitting the dirt beside his body. Blood seeped through his shirt, warm and terrible beneath my hands. His breath came ragged, eyes unfocused but alive. "You got to ride," he murmured. "Don't let it die here." "I'm not leaving you," I said, choking on the words. He gave a faint ghost of a smile. "You always say that." Behind us, my father groaned, falling onto his back. His eyes found me one last time. "You think truth saves anyone?" he whispered. "It just takes everything." Tears blurred the sky. "Then maybe it's time it took from you." He tried to speak again, but the words never came. His hand dropped to the dirt. The wind took the rest. Colt's fingers tightened around mine. "It's over," he said. "No," I whispered. "Not yet." The canyon was quiet now. Only the sound of wind, the soft rustle of dust over stone. I pressed my forehead to Colt's and felt his heartbeat slowing. "Stay with me," I said, "just until sunrise." He looked at me, eyes softer than I'd ever seen. "I'll try." The sun was setting now, the sky turning molten gold. I knew what I had to do. I took the ledger, wrapped it tight, and placed it in Colt's hands. "This belongs to both of us now," I said. He shook his head weakly. "No, it belongs to you. You're the one who can walk out of here." "I won't walk without you." He smiled, barely. "Then carry me with you." I held him close as the light bled out of the sky, the world falling into that quiet place between night and truth. If this story has touched the aching dust inside your chest, stay close, because one dawn still waits to rise over Whitethorn, and when it comes, it will decide whether love can outlive the sins that made it. Dawn crept slow over Whitethorn, a pale fire climbing the ridge. The light fell across the canyon where the last night of my old life ended. My father lay still, his rifle beside him, and in my arms Colt Mercer fought to keep breathing, his heartbeat faint but stubborn as desert grass. I pressed my cheek to his, whispering his name like a prayer. "Stay. Just a little longer." His eyes fluttered open, grey as the sky before rain. "You shouldn't carry this weight." "I already do," I said, "and I won't set it down." We sat there while the world shifted around us. The wind moved soft through the rocks. A hawk circled overhead, its shadow crossing the dust. The kind of silence that felt like an ending and a beginning wrapped us both. When he finally spoke, his voice was no louder than the breath between us. "What happens now?" I looked at the ledger, heavy in my hands. "The truth goes east. Judge Harmon will see it. Whitethorn will burn clean, no matter how much it costs." "And us?" His question held no demand, only a fragile hope. I smiled through tears. Us, we keep riding, 1 mile, 1 day at a time, as long as we can. He closed his eyes, leaned into my touch. Never thought I'd have someone to ride beside. You do now, I said. We buried my father on the canyon ridge, the badge he once carried left on the stone. I whispered no words over him. The land would judge him better than I ever could. By noon, I had Colt in the saddle, tied steady so he wouldn't fall. We rode slow along the mesa, the desert stretching wide and unforgiving, and yet, for the first time, it didn't feel lonely. The wind brushed against us, warm, like it was carrying away the ghosts. I reached across the space between our horses, found his hand. He squeezed once, weak but certain. In that small touch, I felt the weight of everything we had lost, and the fragile promise of everything still left to come. Love in the West was never clean, never easy. But it was ours, and that was enough. The sun climbed higher, and Whitethorn faded behind us. Ahead lay Copper Bend, truth, and whatever life we could steal back from the ashes. I turned to him, voice steady in the quiet. We ride together, Colt, no matter what storm waits. His eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw peace. The horizon opened before us, endless and golden. And as our horses carried us into that light, I knew the West had given me not just a burden, but a bond that no storm could break. If this story has touched a tender place in your heart, let your light stay with us. Comment, share, and subscribe so this Western fire keeps burning for you.